Pro Group Management. Workers' comp that works for you.
This is a special edition of Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
And we have a special show today. We start out with Marlene Lockard, who's co-hosting the show with me today, and Gene Kennedy, who is reporting on the Augustine impeachment trial in Carson City for both KRNV and KVBC. Welcome, Gene. You say there's a moral to this story.
I think there is, and I think the moral of the story is that you can't be vicious and expect to have success. And the background story for so many senators down there was that she alienated so many people and that she had all of these enemies. And if she didn't have all these enemies, they wouldn't have come out and attacked her the way that they did. Now, there certainly is an issue of what she actually did in terms of ethics violations, and she obviously admitted those. But would it all have come out the way it did if she didn't have the enemies that she had?
Do you think perhaps there could be another moral to this story, that those in elected office can get away with that and get away with wrongdoing, and that if those that are blowing the whistle aren't squeaky clean themselves, that they have nowhere to go?
Sure.
I mean, isn't that sending a message out that elected officials can do exactly what they want in office, and now there is no recourse?
Well, I think they do. I think they do, but I just don't think it's on the grand scale that it was with Kathy Augustine. And that was something that I asked Dan Greco, the special prosecutor. Don't other politicians do that? It was something that came up during the trial, and he said, yes, but not to the scale that Kathy Augustine did it. That essentially the office was campaign headquarters. She never had a campaign headquarters. It was her home address. And that the perception among many senators down there was that Jennifer Normington, her executive assistant, was really a campaign manager, essentially in disguise, because she didn't want to hire one.
Okay, what were the senators saying to you, down the hallways? And you don't have to name names here, but what were they saying?
They just didn't buy a lot of the testimony. One by one, they would walk out of the well, I guess it wasn't the Senate chambers, but the room that they were meeting in and listening to this. And they really felt that these were disgruntled employees, particularly Jennifer Normington, the executive assistant, Janine Coward, and felt that they were really conspiring against her, to the point where they were gathering evidence against the state controller and downloading it on computers, one of which was directly in her office. And there were a lot of raised eyebrows about that. And you could even tell. You can tell where they're leaning because of the way that they're questioning her.
But do you really think that evidence didn't exist on state computers?
You know what? I don't go so far as to even really offer an opinion on that. I think the people who really know that are Kathy Augustine and Jennifer Normington and the people who were in that office. I'm not saying that the evidence wasn't there, but I am saying that I don't think that the senators fully bought it, and that's why Article 1 was dismissed immediately on Saturday morning. And once they dismissed Article 1, the case just fell apart, essentially, for Dan Greco from there, because they convicted her on the weakest article.
Last quick question. How
could they dismiss an article she had already pled guilty to?
God, that's a great question. I think they didn't believe the witness's testimony. I think they obviously felt she agreed that she did something wrong, but they didn't trust the information that was coming from Jennifer Normington. They felt that there was an inherent conflict of interest, this gathering against her.
That's really bizarre when somebody has already admitted that they're wrongdoing and then they're found not guilty.
Well, it's perception.
I guess so.
It is perception.
Gene Kennedy, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate your reporting.
Okay.
We'll be right back on Nevada Newsmakers with Erin Neff from the Las Vegas Review-Journal after this.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
If you think Wells Fargo is only checking accounts, you're not seeing the whole picture. Online brokerage, mutual funds, mortgages, and home equity accounts. So get more than free checking and start reaching your goals today. Now you get the picture. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
If you own a business and want to maximize your company's potential, join the Retail Association of Nevada. Our membership benefits include the Nevada Retail Network Self-Insured Group, providing workers' compensation coverage that can lower your rates. That savings can go directly to your bottom line. We are an effective pro-business organization that lobbies on behalf of our business members. The Retail Association of Nevada, protecting Nevada businesses for 35 years.
When you need a new employee, how can you be sure who you're really hiring? A background investigation by Employer Links will uncover criminal records, verify the applicant's education, check their credit history and Social Security verification. An investigation will research professional licenses and driver's licenses and let you know why they're unemployed. Hiring the right person shouldn't be a gamble. Call Employer Links. Employer Links, protecting your investment.
It's the next best thing to having your own wine cellar. Come to the Bonanza Casino for a first in fine dining, reasonably priced wines. When you dine at Cactus Creek Southwestern Steakhouse, you can also enjoy a fine bottle of wine at just about the same price you'd pay at the Vineyard, Silver Oak, Robert Mondavi, Rombauer, Cape Red, Jordan, and Duckhorn, just to name a few. And at the lowest prices of any restaurant or casino in Northern Nevada. And remember, all fine wines are not in wine cellars. They're in the Cactus Creek at the Bonanza Casino, where locals come to play.
And now, back to Nevada Newsmakers with Sam Shad.
And we're joined from Las Vegas by Erin Neff, political reporter for the Las Vegas Review-Journal and one of the best in the state. Welcome to the program, Erin.
Thank you, Sam and Marlene. It's nice to be with you.
Good morning.
Okay, so let's start out. Your lead story today in the Las Vegas Review-Journal that you put together with Ed Vogel. Some see Augustine's win as an ethics loss. Explain, will you?
Certainly. I've talked to a number of the senators who voted on all three articles of impeachment to impeach her, and they're saying that they thought the case was a slam dunk. They thought the prosecutor proved very aptly that Ms. Augustine had committed the impeachable offenses, and they say that she should be removed from office. Now, particularly John Lee, who is a newly elected state senator from Las Vegas, he's the one who actually ran against Ms. Augustine in 2002 in that controller's race where she's accused of using state employees and state resources on her campaign. And he says this decision by the state Senate shows the death of ethics in Nevada politics, if we could ever get that far.
Go ahead, Marlene.
Erin, I was wondering, there's a lot of discussion about messages being sent. What kind of message do you think this result sends to the citizens of Nevada?
Well, I think it sends a pretty lousy message. Here you had the governor calling the legislature into a special session. You had taxpayer money expended. You had this hyped as a critical need for the state, that being impeaching the state controller. I think the average citizen believed that what she had done was so egregious that she should be removed from office. Now, obviously, the average citizen wasn't in the state Senate, didn't hear the case, but just the mere fact that there was an historic impeachment proceeding that cost a lot of money, I think that people believed there was fault and believed this would have come down with her removal from office.
Okay, so what went wrong?
Well, I got to tell you, from talking to a lot of the senators who voted not to impeach her on the first two articles of impeachment, they're telling me that they don't believe the case was ever made. They don't believe that the articles of impeachment that came from the Assembly were ever proved by the special prosecutor. And the other thing that, if you want to use the term went wrong, is that Bill Washoe had requested that opinion from the Legislative Counsel Bureau asking whether an unclassified state employee, someone like Ms. Augustine's personal assistant Jennifer Normington, whether she could do some campaign work on state time. LCB came back and said, yeah, that's legal. Well, there goes 2/3 of the case. And at that point, the state senators really heard a lot of information about how mean Ms. Augustine was to her employees. They didn't hear a lot of information about the specific impeachable offenses, and I think that's why you had a failure to reach that majority.
Well, did the Washoe County prosecutor just not have enough time to put the case together, or was it just not there?
I don't know. I think by all accounts, everyone says Mr. Greco did a great job. Senators to a person say they thought they were very impressed with his performance. Obviously, he was handed something and had 2 weeks to put it together. And perhaps the opinion from Legislative Counsel Bureau really set him back. And I believe that the Attorney General's office, by not actually investigating the state computer, but by relying on computer disks that had information related to the campaign activities that were done in the office, by not actually going and seizing that computer, that essentially took a whole other realm of information off the table for the senators. There was no chain of evidence. There was no protection of these disks. And the senators said, how can we trust that these disks are what they are, that they did come from a state computer? And so a lot of the evidence with respect to the computer charge went out the window. And now you have Mr. Greco left arguing that she filmed commercials in her office, which she did and which they impeached her on.
Erin, there are some that say all you have to do is get a clever attorney like Dominic Gentile and change the focus and the motive to those that are bringing the charge, Ms. Normington and Ms. Coward. What kind of signal does that send to state employees that you have to love the person that you're going to file a complaint against? Where do they go now after this when they see wrongdoing in state government?
Well, you know, I honestly believe this could have somewhat of a chilling effect on state employees. Look, these people were obviously believed they were mistreated. Mr. Gentile's an excellent attorney. His job was to defend Kathy Augustine, and part of the way he did that was by attacking the credibility of the employees who were testifying against Ms. Augustine. And that's what attorneys do. I mean, that's his job. I think essentially these folks who work in these state offices are in a real catch-22. If they keep a detailed diary of exactly everything that's going wrong while it's happening, and it comes to an impeachment proceeding or a trial, they might look like they were out to get their boss from the get-go, and that could be portrayed that way by a shrewd defense attorney. And on the same token, if they don't have excellent records, but they just basically say, I believe what happened was I was spending about X amount of my time on campaign work, and then later they say, well, maybe it was more like 50% of the time, then their credibility comes into question because they don't have their story straight. And that's what occurred in this case. And so there really is a catch-22 for these employees that feel they're in this position.
You know, and the same thing.
If they don't.
And you know, the same thing happens in the private sector too. When people keep track of what's going on from day one, and they come back out, it looks very bad. At the same time, if they don't keep records and something goes wrong, they have nothing to stand on. Erin, it's a great story. If people want to read it, go to lvrj.com, where you can read the latest works of Erin Neff, or even better, buy a copy of the paper. Right, Erin?
Thanks so much, Sam.
Thank you very much. We'll be talking to you soon. Erin Neff from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. We'll be right back on Nevada Newsmakers after this.
Nevada Newsmakers, brought to you in part by Sunbelt Communication.
For a hole in your roof or a whole new roof, Ken Dillon, owner of Van Dyne Roofing, can get it fixed with his eyes closed.
Something spectacular has taken wing not far from Reno or Lake Tahoe, and never far from your mind. An escape of fine dining and legendary golf. Introducing the resort at Red Hawk. And at the center of it all, we've feathered our nest with new villas that have elevated Red Hawk to the status of a premier resort. The Resort at Red Hawk, a beautiful new arrival in northern Nevada.
It's America's largest historical district, and it's fun for the entire family. Virginia City is where the West comes alive every day, from train rides to gunslingers. Your gang can explore mines and interesting museums, visit historic saloons, and do some great shopping. Virginia City is the ultimate in family entertainment, and it's very affordable. Come up and stay overnight in our hotels, motels, and RV park. Virginia City, the Wild West at its best.
So, who do you use for workers' comp?
Pro Group Management.
Ah, I've heard some good things about them.
Oh, you bet. Employee background checks, safety training, claim seminars. Oh, and here's the great part. If you have an issue, they work for you, not against you.
Sounds perfect. And expensive.
Well, that's the best part. They saved me 30%. I've heard they've saved others 50%.
Works for me. Pro Group Management. Finally, workers' comp that works for you.
And now, back to Nevada Newsmakers with Sam Shad.
I'm absolutely thrilled to have on the program Clay Jenkinson, presidential historian. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Let's talk about the election that we have just seen. Your thoughts on it?
Well, the people spoke, and they spoke not emphatically but decisively. You know, there was not as contested an election as we thought it might be, and the people who are bemoaning the results, I think, don't understand the process. That the American people have spoken, and they have effectively endorsed a second term for what has been a very divisive presidency. So I'm cheerful about it. I don't see the red-blue split quite as dramatically as I think the pundits are suggesting.
Okay, so when you look at that split, do you see a way for this president to come back and draw in the other side to get more people to the middle, or do you think he's going to continue on his own path?
I think if he were a great president and a great leader, he would draw the country back towards the center, and he would embrace the blue, and he would lead in an unprecedented way. And as Bill Clinton said, build a bridge to the 21st century. I frankly don't think that that's on the agenda of George Bush. I don't think he wants that. I think he is an ideologue in certain regards, and I think that in certain ways he's enslaved to an ideological approach to government. So I don't think that he has neocon and fiscal conservatism of a certain type. I mean, anti-welfare state.
Oh, okay, because I was going to say fiscal conservatism. I don't think so.
No, but he's been a wild spender, and that's one. I'm surprised that he hasn't been held accountable on that score, and particularly from members of his own party. But the fact is that he is following the footsteps of Ronald Reagan in an attempt to whittle down and maybe erode altogether the welfare state. That's a respectable political position, but it's not one that's likely to draw the country to the center.
Okay, when you see the murmurs now about Iran, does that concern you? And is there a comparison in history with another president who has gone this way?
I don't think we're going to invade Iran, but I do think Iran and North Korea are going to be gigantic issues that frankly are beyond the capacity of the United States to settle. You know, Iraq was invadable. There's a tin pot tyrant there. He's obviously committed enormous abuses. We knew we could win this war. We won the last one against him. There's a worldwide coalition that regarded him as a schnook. That's not true with Iran, or really even North Korea, and I don't think we have the capacity to do quite there what we did in Iraq, and I think frankly we've been chastened by the Iraq debacle. I think that any rational being has to see Iraq as at best a mixed event, and at worst a debacle for American prestige in the world.
So you don't see any comparison to Alexander the Great or the British Empire?
I haven't seen the new Alexander the Great movie. Apparently nobody has. But I don't think this. I think that George Bush is a reasonable man, and that he has been chastened by his experience. He really just sneaked back into the presidency by a small margin, really. He should have been overwhelmingly reelected in a time like this. I think everyone knows that this hasn't been the best moment for the United States, and I think he will think twice before he allows himself to be persuaded on Iran. On the other hand, I think Iran is a much deeper issue than Iraq ever was.
Absolutely, with the nuclear situation. Let's change subject here to presidential libraries. With the opening of the Clinton Library, is this a form of rewriting of history from my own perspective, as it were?
Well, of course. All presidential libraries are propaganda pieces. If you go to any one of them, from Eisenhower to LBJ to Jimmy Carter, they all put the best foot forward, and we wouldn't expect anything else, would we? They're vanity pieces. But I think Bill Clinton is quite interesting about this. He said the Monica Lewinsky business will be there. It will be fairly handled. We'll have to see about that. He also said at the opening, you know, all of us are a little bit blue and a little bit red. And I heard some statesmanship there and even some reflectivity that he didn't always show as president. I'm one of the few people who read his autobiography, which I regard as a pretty bad one. And I was disappointed that he wasn't more forthcoming. You know, he was enormously forthcoming about his childhood and not particularly about his adulthood. And of course, we want just the other way around.
Well, being the salacious society that we are. Did you see the documentary, The Reagan Letters?
I did not.
It's an amazing documentary that's on the Discovery Times channel where Ron Reagan Jr. reads a lot of the letters that the president wrote. I never understood, and I admire Ronald Reagan, but I never understood the depth, the intellectual depth of this president. He was remarkable.
I think one of the biggest mistakes we make, Sam, is that we demonize opposition political figures. Now, clearly, Clinton was demonized by the right. Mrs. Clinton, I think, was right in some respects. The left has demonized George Bush and Ronald Reagan. If you read those love letters from Reagan to his wife Nancy, or read Reagan's letters in general, they are not only interesting, well-written, handily crafted, but in some regards they're profound and elegiac. This is a man with considerable depth of soul, and when I read some of the letters, I felt ashamed of myself for belittling him in the way that we all did as an actor and as a man who fell asleep at the wheel. This was a rather interesting human being who, in some regards, had passed his prime when he became president. But I think we underestimated him in some really significant ways.
I thought the letters of communication between world leaders, but then also the letters to little children that he responded to were just remarkable. Folks, if you're not familiar with Clay Jenkinson, you need to get familiar with him. He's got how would you regard this, a small
book? New chapbook, yes.
A book on Lewis and Clark in Iowa, and then an audio adventure, Lewis and Clark on the Trail, and you've got a new book coming out called
Becoming
Jefferson's People. And I don't want to talk about that today. I want you to come back, and then we'll talk about the book. But you're a great guy. Your website is?
Let's see, www.th-jefferson.org.
You will find that on our website later on today. Thank you so much for being here, Clay. Always. We'll be right back on Nevada Newsmakers after this.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
When you need a new employee, how can you be sure who you're really hiring? A background investigation by Employer Links will uncover criminal records, verify the applicant's education, check their credit history and Social Security verification. An investigation will research professional licenses and driver's licenses and let you know why they're unemployed. Hiring the right person shouldn't be a gamble. Call Employer Links. Employer Links, protecting your investment.
And now, back to Nevada Newsmakers with Sam Shad.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we're joined by Liz MacMenamin, Director of Government Affairs for the Retail Association of Nevada. Pleasure to have you here. Martha Gould, former librarian for Washoe County, and Marlene continues on with us here from Capital Strategies. Marlene, I got to point out that you've been a loyal Democrat for a long time. You have very strong feelings on this Augustine case. Are there any politics thrown in here too?
Well, no, I don't really think that this was a partisan issue. I think Senator Ensign, the governor, the attorney general all set aside politics and tried to move forward and asked Miss Augustine to resign because they thought the offense was egregious enough for her to resign. I'm concerned about when I read her statements now that she's been vindicated, and in the Las Vegas Sun, that she likened this whole experience to being bawled out by parents. I think that sums it up and says it all. This woman,
I think that in paying her fines with the Ethics Commission, in pleading guilty to that, that was one thing to be set aside. The Senate did what they had to do with the evidence presented. Unfortunately, maybe it wasn't, maybe the witnesses weren't didn't present their case as well as they should have, and all along I said they sounded like disgruntled employees. Now, I've been in the private sector. You pointed out this happens in the private sector also. It has happened to me. You make choices, you move on, you get a different job. You don't stay there and start building a case. You do what you need to do, and then you move along if you no longer can stay there.
But if there's wrongdoing, don't you have an obligation to report?
Absolutely.
When you're a public official.
That is, I think, perhaps the worst part of this whole issue, and that is that people are going to be afraid to be a whistleblower. It has sent a very negative message to government employees, and it's bad. I think that Kathy Augustine has done something by not resigning. She has sent a very bad message to the general voting public that elected officials can get away with them.
Well, she's also sent a message saying, "Don't mess with me because I will fight back."
Obviously,
and how much money has
do that?
And how much money has it cost her to do this?
If you've got the money and the ability to fight back, then that also sends a very negative message to anyone who sees wrongdoing, saying, you know, I'm going to be...
Martha, you know, people have the right to defend themselves.
Exactly.
Of course they have the right to
defend
themselves.
These attorneys may have taken this case on the fact of the basis of the evidence. We don't know that.
We don't know.
We don't know.
The bottom line is that as far as I'm concerned, it has sent a message to the general electorate that, yeah, you can... She already pled guilty to the ethics violation.
I'm concerned that this will create a precedent now that opens the door for elected officials that think that they can just act with impunity and
I don't know. I think we had a president at one time who absolutely walked away from a case where he was clearly guilty and of wrongdoing in the office and set a bad example for...
When are we ever going to get past Clinton?
I don't know.
When are we ever going to...
When you have impeachment, you know, then, I mean, it's only fair to bring that up. And
he did walk away, and she has.
And she
based on evidence.
All right, I want to change the subject because we're kind of limited on time today. We had a very busy show here. Erin Neff has been a very busy woman this week. She also had a story in the Review Journal talking about Minority Leader Lynn Hetrick up in arms about the fact that fewer Republicans were put on the legislative committees next session, but also that some of the Democrats or the Republicans had been moving across to work with the Democrats to get better assignments. Is there an end run going on here?
Wouldn't this be terrible if we actually had bipartisanship?
Wouldn't it be terrible? However, that's not the case. Minority Leader Hetrick has not lost his leadership skills. However, the two that was discussed in Erin's article possibly would have gone across the aisle to the Democrats anyway, looking for committees. They felt wounded in the fact that they obviously hadn't been given committees or whatever the reason, but I don't think that Erin looked at the whole side of this issue. Speaker Perkins had made the decision not to put as many Republicans on the committee. He has got some interesting committees this session.
And I apologize, we are out of time. We'll be right back on Nevada Newsmakers after this.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
It's America's largest historical district, and it's fun for the entire family. Virginia City is where the West comes alive every day, from train rides to gunslingers. Your gang can explore mines and interesting museums, visit historic saloons, and do some great shopping. Virginia City is the ultimate in family entertainment, and it's very affordable. Come up and stay overnight in our hotels, motels, and RV park. Virginia City, the Wild West at its best.
A spirited discussion. What's coming up tomorrow?
David Miller, chairman of the RSCVA, and Scott Bensing, chief of staff to Senator Ensign.
We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.